Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm Joe Haggerty. I'm CEO of the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us this morning for our General Assembly breakfast. There's lots of people we want to talk to and thank, but we're going to begin with our major sponsor. Virginia Tech has been sponsoring this whole legislative program during the year. And Dr. Tim Sands is going to be on in 1 minute. Dr. Sands, I just want to thank you for having your staff members work with us. David Baker, of course, and Elizabeth Hooper. But now let's hear from the president of Virginia Tech, Dr. Tim Sands.
Thank you, Joe. And it's great to be with everybody here. Thank you for inviting us to the Alexandria Chamber and for allowing us to host today's important discussion. Virginia Tech is honored to be the presenting sponsor for the Chamber's 2021 policy series. It's certainly been a challenging year for all of us professionally and personally. I'd like to thank our elected leaders at the federal, state, and local levels for rising to meet the challenge. We're also seeing communities come together in ways that we might not have imagined a few years ago. We were just talking before we came on about how Alexandria is really coming together to support the schools and just make sure that everyone is safe. So it's very impressive. And I think we'll be able to take what we've learned from this pandemic and apply it to make our community even better going forward. We're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Everybody's excited about that. You know, there are some concerns, but overall, it's looking pretty good. The growing availability of vaccines and everyone continuing to follow public health guidelines. You know, we're working with 18 to 22-year-olds, and I'm so impressed. They're really upping their mask game. They're wearing much better fitting masks than they were 6 months ago. They're managing to maintain a proper distance, avoiding large gatherings for the most part. There are some high-profile examples where they fail, but across the country. But on the whole, they're remarkably well. And they're starting to register, as I hope we all are, for vaccines. And as soon as you're eligible, getting the shot. These things aren't easy in a university setting. The opportunity to learn and engage with individuals from other communities, cultures, and backgrounds is part of the Virginia Tech experience, as it is for residential campuses everywhere. And the virus kind of works directly against that. So we've managed to preserve the experience while continuing to follow the guidelines. And I'm incredibly proud of the way our Hokie community has responded. I'd like to publicly thank our students, faculty, and staff who've been able to really incrementally return to in-person learning and with plans for a fully in-person fall semester. I think it'll be a little different than a normal fall semester, and we certainly will learn some things, or have learned some things, from pandemic operations that we will continue doing going forward, even when the pandemic's over. So I think the experience will be even better in the future. I appreciate the support of our leaders in Richmond, particularly, who are working to ensure that our Commonwealth emerges from the pandemic stronger than ever. This past General Assembly session successfully overcame many logistic and technical challenges. I know personally, I had about 38 meetings by Zoom, and to be honest, it was as effective as it is in person. It wasn't quite the same experience, but but I'd say from a practical standpoint, it was pretty darn good. We saw significant investments in education, healthcare, small businesses, and many other key areas for the Commonwealth's physical and economic health. But thanks to the work of the leaders you will hear from momentarily, there are many reasons to be optimistic and many things to be proud of. And we have great confidence that the Commonwealth will move forward and really accelerate out of the pandemic. I'm also pleased to share that the development of the Innovation Campus just up the road remains on schedule. And thanks to the diligent work of our Virginia Tech team, along with our partners at the Smith Group and Whiting Turner, we anticipate groundbreaking later this year. Dr. Lance Collins and his team are making great use of the new space on Potomac Avenue. I'd invite you to come by and visit, but it's a little early. But as things ease with the pandemic, we hope you can stop by and visit our storefront, if you will, on Potomac. They're developing programs and partnerships needed to supply the talent that the region needs and the Commonwealth expects. We hope that this time next year, we can invite you all to an in-person event that will mark a major step forward and the beginning of the future for North Potomac Yard. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here with you this morning, and I'll turn it over back to Joe.
Dr. Sands, thank you so much. Everybody is still very excited about the Innovation Campus and watching it closely. And anybody who's driven by there lately sees the metro station going up and sees all the development. So we're very excited about it, and we'd like it to happen even more quickly, but we're being patient, and everybody is talking about the potential and the future. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank our other sponsors. So Virginia Tech, Transurban, Dominion Energy, AT&T, Care First, Kinnaman Insurance, and Family First Law. Thanks so much. We have some folks from the city with us this morning. First, Vice Mayor Elizabeth Bennett Parker, member of the City Council, is with us. Mark Jenks, City Manager, has joined us, and City Legislative Director Sarah Taylor is also with us. So thanks so much to them for, they've been busy lately on budget issues, and it's great to have them all with us. Just an introduction of our chairs. We have 6 people who have chaired the chamber. One is currently chairing the chamber. So Stephanie Beyer-Kirby is with us. Thank you, Stephanie. Also, David Millard, Jen Kinnaman, Andrew Palmieri, John Renner, and Lonnie Rich. We thank them so much for staying involved with the chamber. And we have lots of other board members on the call this morning. Just as we get to the call and as the questions begin and our guests are introduced, you can submit questions to the chat at any time. We'll be watching them, and we'll be giving them to Ann Harbor so that she can factor them into her questioning. And now I'd like to introduce Brent McKenzie he's the Government Relations and Community Outreach Manager at Transurban, and he's going to introduce our moderator. Brent.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to the Alexandria Chamber for organizing this opportunity for us to hear from our legislators. Transurban is proud to once again be a sponsor. I'm looking forward to hearing about the historic legislative session, and really just want to thank our legislators for slogging through what must have been a very tough legislative session. Glad that everyone made it through safe and sound. As the operators of the 495, 95, and 395 express lanes, safety is always top of mind. As many of us head back to the office and travel is returning to normal, just want to remind you, please slow down and pay attention to the road ahead of you. And remember to stay off your phone, as it is now illegal to hold your phone as you drive. You know, in a typical year, this is the point in my remarks where I would tell you all about the great things going on the express lanes, the travel time savings, and the number of customers who are utilizing the express lanes to get a faster, safer, more reliable trip. But, you know, for the last year, not many of us have been on the road to worry about those types of things. Throughout the pandemic, Transurban has maintained our commitments to the Commonwealth, keeping the express lanes running and making our second $15 million annual transit payment that will help many of our transit agencies recover over the next year. And I'm proud of the work we've done to support our community here in Northern Virginia by providing funding to dozens of organizations, including Carpenter Shelter, Northern Virginia Family Service, the Child and Family Network Centers, and Nova Community College to provide food, shelter, childcare, and job training opportunities. As we look to the future, we're optimistic at Transurban. We were recently chosen as the preferred developer of Phase 1 of the Maryland Express Lanes, where we will work with the Commonwealth and Maryland to widen the American Legion Bridge and extend the express lanes into Maryland. In addition, we continue to advance work on the 95 express lanes extension down to Fredericksburg and the 495 Next project, extending the lanes to George Washington Memorial Parkway. We've always believed that transportation has the power to bring communities together, to connect people, and to provide opportunities. That has never felt more important than it does today. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the chair of the Chamber's Government Relations Committee and my good friend, Ann Harbor. Ann is the Director, Government Affairs and Local Engagement for Care First, Blue Cross Blue Shield. She currently serves on several local boards and commissions, including the Board of Directors of the Center for Alexandria's Children, Chair of the Alexandria Public Health Advisory Board, Chair of the Advisory Board of the Governor's Health Science Academy at T.C. Williams, Good Shepherd Housing's Community Leadership Council, and the Sorensen Institute Northern Virginia Regional Board. Ann is truly one of Alexandria's finest public servants. Ann?
Thanks so much, Brent. Good morning, everyone. So happy to have everyone here with us this morning. The Government Relations Committee is always so excited to host you all and have opportunity to learn from our elected leaders of the challenges and opportunities here in the Commonwealth. The Government Relations Committee is made up of a diverse group of business leaders throughout Alexandria, representing all industries that are here in the city of Alexandria who wish to inform public policy in a way that can that benefits the whole of the city of Alexandria. And I'm so honored to be able to lead this group for a second year in a row. So with that kind of framing, we want to jump right into our questions for our members. Again, thank you all for joining us. Recognizing that we do have a fair number of new members who are joining us this morning, we wanted to invite our delegation to introduce themselves, to give a little background about yourselves and your work, recognizing that some of our members are new to the Commonwealth or new to the role of the General Assembly. So we'll start with Senator Barker with a little elevator pitch about yourself to our general membership.
All right, hi, I'm George Barker, state senator. Been in the state senate for 14 years now. It's my 14th year in the General Assembly, having been first elected in 2007. Prior to that, I worked for over 30 years with the Regional Health Planning Agency, the Health Systems Agency of Northern Virginia, helping to shape the healthcare system in Northern Virginia. And I was very pleased to be able to be there at a time when population of Northern Virginia was growing substantially and changing in a lot of different ways. And we were able to really make some differences in terms of how things operate in Northern Virginia for healthcare services. And then since then, I've done some part-time consulting and worked at community health centers, including being CEO of the Community Health Center down in Prince William County for a couple of years. Also, it was heavily involved in a lot of different things in the community prior to going down to the General Assembly. So glad to be with you here today, and I'm glad to see that my constituent Ann Harbor is helping lead you. So thank you.
Delegate Herring.
Thank you so much, Ann. I'm Charnel Herring. I'm the Majority Leader in the Virginia House of Delegates. I came to Alexandria actually from a homeless shelter at the age of 16. We came to Alexandria because it had affordable housing, and we moved in an apartment in Etzel Road. I was in high school at the time. I went to school at George Mason University, where I earned my bachelor's of arts and economics, and then went on to law school at Catholic University's Columbus School of Law. Worked at actually the law firm was actually on K Street, so I worked at a K Street law firm for 8 years, doing corporate law, business litigation, and some family law. I left that law firm, started my own small practice, and then went in-house with a family company, Admin and Logistics Services. So I did the legal work for our company, as well as doing government procurement. We did logistics services, mostly for military installations. I was past president of the West End Business Association, chair of the Women's Commission, and served on the Juvenile Justice Commission here in the city. And Governor Kane at that time appointed me to the Council on Status of Women. Ran my first race in 2009 for the Virginia House of Delegates, won by a small margin, 16 votes. And I'm just honored to be there, and now the first woman and first African-American ever to serve as Majority Leader in the House. Also the first woman and first African-American to chair the Courts of Justice Committee. I also serve on the Rules Committee. And again, it's just one of my biggest honors of my life to serve in that historic chamber and serve this community, which is, I've always described since this past year what we've been going through, resilient. So thank you.
Delegate Levine.
So I'm Delegate Mark Levine. I proudly serve the 45th District, which is the eastern half of the city of Alexandria. Whatever Charnel doesn't represent, I represent, as well as smaller portions of Arlington and Fairfax County. I'm in my 6th year in the Virginia House of Delegates. I'm a former trial lawyer, and I moved to Alexandria 20 years ago to serve in Congress for Congressman Barney Frank as Chief Counsel on the Hill. And I've been a citizen activist for decades. And in the House of Delegates, I sit on 4 committees, all of which are very important to me and I think to the Commonwealth. There's Courts of Justice Committee, which Delegate Herring chairs. In addition, there's Privileges and Elections Committee, the Health, Welfare and Institutions Committee, and the Public Safety Committee. And I am the chair of 2 subcommittees that are also very important. One is the Public Safety Subcommittee, and that deals with all those issues of police reform and jailing reform that you've heard a lot about. The other subcommittee that I chair is the Constitutional Amendments Subcommittee. We have 2 constitutional amendments that came out this year, both of which I'm very proud of. One of which is marriage equality, which is a cause I've been fighting for about, well, more than 20 years now. And the other is to restore the rights of folks who've gotten out of prison to vote. And I very much strongly believe in the right to vote, and that's also a Delegate Herring's bill. So I'm really proud to be with you here today. For those of you who don't know, I have Mark's monthly meetups every single month. I've been doing them for 6 years. You're welcome to come. You're always welcome to come. Whether or not you live in my part of Alexandria or not, anyone's welcome. We're doing them tomorrow from 1 to 3 virtually. One day we'll go back to a restaurant, back to Los Tios. And for those of you who don't know, I do happen to be running, in addition to delegate, for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. I won't make this political, but if you want to find out more about that and how I think I can transform it to a full-time job, come see me. We have lots and lots of virtual events. I'd love to tell you about the campaign.
Thanks so much. As everyone can see, we are very well represented in Richmond by these fantastic leaders who really do give so much of themselves for the benefit of Alexandrians and the Commonwealth. We're going to move right into our next question. We're a year into a pandemic. We have vaccines being distributed, folks really concerned about how the Commonwealth supplies are going, and what Virginians need to know about the distribution. We've seen a lot of disconnect with people getting vaccinated or having concerns. And we recognize that we have a unique opportunity as businesses to be a voice in that process. And we'd love to hear your feedback on what we can do as business leaders, as business owners, to help the community when it comes to vaccine engagement, vaccine distribution. And I'll start with Delegate Herring.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a great question. And I think it's just spreading the word. If there's anything, if you have a retail shop, just, information about signing up either with the Virginia Department of Health or the city's department, and reminding people to check their emails, check their phones, and just having sort of information available for individuals about signing up for the vaccine. Our distribution has sped up. That's one of the things that we addressed in session, is to make it actually allow people who are qualified, whether they're studying and as long as they get training, to put arms, needles into arms. And so I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, it was certainly a priority. That's not a partisan issue, is to make sure that we are getting, vaccinating at a high rate. And we've seen the uptick of that information. And the other thing I would also, I think I said it, but it is important, and it's just talking to people, reminding them to check their emails, answer their phones once they sign up, because the time for the vaccine, you don't know when it's coming. When you're next in line, it's important to keep up. One of the things I do when I talk to people, I always ask, have you been vaccinated yet? That's my first question. And if they haven't, or that opens a conversation about what do I do? And it's just, and those just 2 simple things. The city's, Department of Health or the state, and that you will help so many people, because a lot of people, believe it or not, don't even know that that's the way that they can do it. So just keep talking to people and ask that. I include it in every conversation I have.
Delegate Levine.
So it's been actually quite nice to see the transformation from a lot of confusion and some dysfunction at the beginning of the vaccine process to, I think, a pretty smooth process now. One of the ways I measure that is all the emails to our office and the constituent help we get. And if you do need help, you should contact, you're my constituent, you should contact my office so that we can help you. But at the beginning of this, in January, there was, let's face it, the previous federal administration, the prior president, did not have a good rollout of the vaccine. They promised more vaccine than was available. Everyone thought the vaccine was there when it wasn't. And there was tremendous confusion in Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax over the exact process for handing out the vaccine and who was going to do it. One of the things I did back in mid-January is I hosted 3 town halls, one for Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax. In Alexandria, I had Dr. Herring, the chair of the head of the Alexandria Department of Health, along with Dr. Daniel Vula, who but no one else calls the vaccine czar, but he's the guy in charge of vaccine distribution all across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we gave just very frank information about the process to people. And it's just interesting to see how the numbers have gone down. At our first town hall, we had more than 500 people. I got a Zoom link for 500 and 750 wanted to hear. There was that much interest. But I think the process has gone a lot better since then. Virginia has gone from being in the 40s to being around 6th in the nation in terms of per capita vaccinations. And that's because we have centralized the process. At the beginning, they gave it to various hospitals and pharmacies. And so a lot of vaccine was going unused. But by centralizing the process, I think it's a much better process now. And folks who are not in queue, they're not in line, need to sign up. You sign up in line, they let you know every week or so, hey, you're still on the list. Don't worry, we're going to get to you. And people have gotten priority. Now, each county and city do it slightly differently, which is confusing. There's also the fact that you get it where you live in Alexandria. You also can get it where you work if you're one of the essential workers. So kind of, and the localities are slightly different one from the other. But in general, they've been pretty good about prioritizing older populations, people with various health risks. And when folks get sidelined, either because of a computer problem or someone got missed over, they contact our office and we make sure they get their vaccine. Now, if you're 25 and healthy, we can't get you a vaccine. We just can't do that. Sorry, you're just gonna have to wait in line. There's not enough vaccine yet. But if you're over 75 or you have a health condition or you're an essential worker, transit or grocery, or we absolutely can make sure that you get your place in line. So we've got a lot of constituent service. Don't hesitate to contact our office.
Senator Barker.
Sure. Yeah, I think my two House colleagues here have gone over a lot of the history on things. Virginia sort of worked our way through the processes during this pandemic. We were a little slow on testing initially, and then got that fixed. We were also, as Doug Levine talked about, slow on the vaccine initially in terms of being able to get it into people's arms quickly. But we've fixed that, so we're now one of the top states in the nation in terms of the percent of our population that is vaccinated. So we're making tremendous progress. The distribution of the vaccine and the availability of it is through the local health departments, City of Alexandria Health Department, but also county health departments in other jurisdictions. If you're, as Delegate Levine said, working in another jurisdiction, it's easy to do that. But we also has some vaccines that have been available through the various pharmacies. The two major pharmacies that have been most involved in this have been CVS and Walgreens, but there are efforts being made to bring in a number of other pharmacies, including some of the independent pharmacies now. So they provide an opportunity. If you have a pharmacy that you regularly use, you might want to check it with them to see if they have that vaccine availability there as well. In terms of what you can do with in the business community is making sure that there are clear messages and that you have the information, so that the people who involved with your business, whether it's employees or whether it's customers, you can be able to provide them answers and tell them who to contact if they ask you about that there. So we're all pulling together to make this work in Virginia, and we're glad to work with you on it.
Thank you so much. We've learned quite a bit through the course of this last year, but one of the seemingly positive takeaways has been how well meetings have been conducted virtually. And while we understand and support the benefits to meeting in person, we have also seen the great benefit in terms of breadth of participation virtually, particularly from an equity perspective. As it stands now, local government is only conducting meetings virtually for the duration of the pandemic. But post-pandemic, would you support the Commonwealth allowing governmental meetings to take place virtually, or have a virtual component to all meetings over the course of the next few years? I know Delegate Levine has been a champion around this issue, so we're going to start with Delegate Levine.
Thank you, Ann. This is something I've worked a lot on. It actually began pre-COVID as I worked to put forward a bill back in 2020. Yes, we still had a session in 2020. God, time changes in COVID. And that was actually to allow virtual meetings for folks who have family members who get very sick, and to make sure that someone serving in local office, for example, Arlington County Board member Katie Crystal had a child born premature, and she literally had to choose between taking care of her child and serving in her capacity as county board member, which she should never have had to do. So that bill began in 2020, continued to 2021, and actually had nothing to do with COVID. But in the process of working on that bill, I worked on the COVID bill as well, which was a bill to allow localities to continue during COVID to have virtual meetings and to talk about anything. That's something I fought really hard for. The original draft said it had to only be about continuity of government. And I fought really hard and succeeded in getting language in there to say, no, they could talk about anything, anything they wanted to do, because they need to continue their ordinary functions and not just the emergency ones in this time. But your question is, what should remain afterwards? And I think it's a really good question. And I think we should include a lot more virtual afterwards. There was some discussion on both the bills that there is a certain advantage for local government and frankly for our General Assembly to do things in person. And I can tell you, as someone who sat through now 2 virtual sessions of the House of Delegates, both in the summer, the special session of 2020 and the session we had in 2021, that while I think we got a lot of really good business done, there are definitely advantages to meeting in person, to be able to go up to a legislator in their seats and say, hey, are you supporting this? Are you opposing this? Where are you on this? I think for us, I look forward to coming back in session in person. I think it's absolutely necessary, don't get me wrong, but when COVID's over, we need to come back. And I think there's some advantages for local officials as well to meet in person absent an emergency. That being said, for the public, I think virtual stuff is great. Many of you know I'm the chair of the Virginia Transparency Caucus. We're the folks who brought you live streamed and archived committee meetings, recorded meetings. Very proud of that work. That's the reason why the public can watch what we're doing. But what virtual does is let the public not just watch what we're doing without traveling all the way to Richmond, which we did before COVID, but actually participate in the meetings. We had public attend more meetings than ever before because they didn't have to drive down to Richmond at 7 a.m. They could just appear in the room and show up virtually and testify and be full partners. And I want to keep that going, whether it's local government or certainly the General Assembly. Allow the public to participate. And so while we probably should be there in person, if it's not an emergency, having the public be able to attend virtually, particularly in the General Assembly, I think it's very useful. Now, you might say, well, for local government, most folks can just drive in. And that's true for some, but some people are disabled. Some people are unable to leave their homes. Some folks are in nursing homes. I think a virtual component is something that we should take out of COVID and bring into future times.
Senator Barker.
Sure. I think, that we've certainly all experienced a lot of Zoom meetings over the last year, that's for sure. And there have, they have their benefits in many instances, and some of which Delegate Levine was talking about there. But I think it is important that once we pass the COVID situation, that we go back to a lot of the requirements that have been in place for years. I think it's important that constituents and the public be able to be participating in our meetings and in meetings at the local level as well, in person, and be able to be with us. I can tell you that in the Senate, whereas the House has had virtual meetings to take care of all their business, we had all ours in person. So we met in a very large room where there was a substantial spacing to be able to have 40 senators all in one huge room at the Science Museum down in Richmond, and it worked out extraordinarily well. We also had committee meetings there, and the one thing that I thought was not as effective was the testimony and involvement of the public in the processes there. We did have the public who was able to participate as in terms of being online, and be visual there and be able to present testimony, but it's not quite the same experience, and it's not as easy for them to be able to do anything other than just present their 2 minutes of testimony or whatever we would give them to talk about. Other than that, they were not able to talk to us before the meeting, after the meeting, those types of things, what you get when you're in person in the General Assembly building. So I think it is important that we do provide access to the public to us, both in the meetings, but also before and after the meetings, which I think provides an opportunity for interaction there that is very constructive. So I think it's important we go back to that, and the public may be able to participate in the future by watching, which they have been able to do all along in many instances, but also be able to participate and provide comments that way as well. But I think most of the public clearly, and certainly most of the ones I talked to, clearly would have liked to have been in person to be able to make sure that everything was being understood in terms of what their positions were on issues. So we'll be back to that, but I think it will be a constructive one. And I think there will be obviously some opportunity for the public to participate virtually.
And Leader Herring.
I agree with my colleagues. As soon as it's safe, I think we need to go back in person. I think it's just fundamental that citizens have one central place where they can petition their government. It's a basic concept. But the positive thing, I think, a component is the allowing virtual testimony. Sometimes we have hearings at 7:30 in the morning, and it's just really impossible for someone to they don't want to necessarily miss work. And I think that's a component that I think we should seriously look about keeping as we move forward. And as far as the House being virtual, look, we have 100 members. It just would have been a logistic nightmare and probably very costly for us to have tried to find a space. So the Senate was lucky they only have 40, we have 100. So, but it seemed to work, and we finished same time, on time, so all's good.
Well, thank you. I know from a local perspective, it's certainly been beneficial for our residents here in the city to be able to engage with the boards and commissions, not necessarily the elected bodies, but also the civic organizations that the city council has appointed, that when we as a chamber are looking at equity issues, having that virtual participation allows that single mom like myself to participate in the Commission for Women. I don't have to leave the house. I can cook my children dinner, and I can, and still inform some of the policy for the, retail owners, the restaurant workers who might have a back office space that they can participate in. It was a welcome addition. It really lends itself to having that diversity of experiences, informing our public bodies, our council, our boards and commissions. So as you all continue to consider how that participation will continue, appreciate the thoughtfulness that you approach this with, but the chamber is certainly heartened by the fact that we'll see greater and more inclusive participation across the board, both at the state and local level. One of the things that we found, that has come probably as a big surprise to a lot of people, is that COVID hasn't had as a severe impact on our state budget as initially anticipated. What do you think the pandemic recovery will look like for the Commonwealth? And what do you think, especially from a small business, a retail, restaurant, and hospitality, even events venues, what do you view the General Assembly's role in the recovery phase as it relates to the retail sector and our small businesses? And I'm going to start this time with Senator Barker, please.
All right. Well, I'm on the Finance and Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and work closely with Senator Janet Howell, chair of that. So the two of us sort of guide sort of where we go on a lot of these types of things. What was significant was how much better, as Ann talked about, that Virginia has done during this pandemic period than anybody anticipated. Last year, we passed what I think all of us thought, and widely around the state, the perception was that we'd passed an outstanding budget to meet a lot of needs of Virginians that had not been met previously, or adequately at least, in many instances. Unfortunately, we passed that budget in the middle of March, and about 2 days later, we had a state of emergency declared that pretty much shut things down. And when we came back for our veto session in April last year, we ended up freezing most of the increased spending or new spending that had been, the new projects that had been funded in the budget. Put a freeze on that because we were worried, and there was talk that we were going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2.8 billion short of funds, which is not an insignificant amount to try to deal with there. But what happened was that we had a horrible April revenue picture. It was pretty bad for much of May, but then after that, we bounced back extremely strongly. And actually, by the time we got to July and began to see the full May figures and the June figures there, we had a meeting of what's called the Governor's Accountability Commission on Revenue Estimates. Does the projections of how much general fund revenue we expected we're going to have, and so therefore how much spending we could put in there. And there are about 25, 30, I guess probably 30 or 35 people who participate in that. It's legislative leaders, and Delegate Harry and I participated in those meetings throughout the year. And it's also a lot of business people and some academics and others who are participating in that whole process. Most people were pretty pessimistic at the meeting we had in July. And I was sort of the outlier saying, no, we're actually doing extraordinarily well, and we're going to do much better than any of the rest of you think. And they sort of looked at me with like, you know, what's crazy about this guy? It turned out I was basically saying we were going to be up at least probably 5% in terms of revenue for the year. It turned out I was wrong. We're actually up much better. We're doing much better than even I thought we would do. So we've exceeded everybody's expectation there. And we are actually going to finish this year with our revenues up more than 10% from what they were last year. So it's been, we've done extraordinarily well. A lot of that is attributable to what the business community has done throughout Virginia. The business community has, throughout Virginia, has made every effort to try to maintain their operations, to try to keep where they could, and often with some of the PPP loans that were available to be able to keep their employees on the payroll. In many instances in which you know, they didn't have a whole lot of work for the employees to do, if any, but wanted to keep them there for the long term and to help them and their families, and also be in a position where you didn't have to go out and hire new people once the economy bounced back. So our economy has been extraordinarily strong. We've done much better than most states throughout the entire country, particularly the large states. We're one of the very few large states that's had a very strong economic scene this year. And what we've done is we've tried to make sure that not only did we have the PPP loans, but we set up our own loan program in Virginia at the state level. The federal money that we got with the CARES Act, a lot of that was divvied out to local governments, and the city of Alexandria got a lot of that, and the city of Alexandria did a lot of support of local businesses with those funds. So we made that an effort and a priority throughout this whole process to be able to help our businesses be able to stay functioning if at all possible, and have done a lot of other things to try to, you know, help along the way. And actually one of the bills that I got passed this year was a bill to allow restaurants to be, who got in many instances, including Alexandria, obviously, particularly impacting some of the restaurants in Old Town, to be able to have tents set up, whether it was in the street or whether it was in their parking lot or wherever, to be able to do that. And the bill that I got through this year allowed those tents to stay up for 12 months after the end of the state of emergency, so that there's not only helping during the pandemic period, but to help cover the cost of the tents and those types of things, to help the restaurants be able to provide you know, the same type of service or additional service once they're doing it with their in-person within their restaurants there to be able to take care of things. So we are actually in very good shape. And also one of the other things that we have done in Virginia, it used to be Virginia was not one of the shining stars nationally in terms of workforce development training and those types of things. We sort of figured, well, we're not going to get involved in, you know, the private sector business operations. But starting about 5 years ago, we have really ramped up what we're doing in trying to provide workforce development training for a lot of people who need jobs or else have a job but want to work towards a better job, a better paying job, a job that they would like more to have. So we now have a very strong workforce development program and are working with businesses to be able to try to make sure we have people who are trained to be able to fill the jobs. Part of what we were encountering 5 years ago when we started on this venture was that there were a lot of companies that could have created additional jobs, but couldn't find enough qualified people to be able to take the jobs here in Virginia. So we've been really working hard to be able to provide the people with the credentials to be able to fill a lot of those jobs. We're not all the way there yet, but we're making tremendous progress. And just recently talked about sort of using Zoom. We set up a thing in Virginia to having a virtual job fair. And whereas usually, you know, you get a handful of companies who participate in the job fair somewhere, and you get a number of people who are unemployed or looking to switch jobs, looking for better jobs to be able to come and participate in that. At this one virtual session that we have for a job fair on a weekend. We had thousands of companies participate. 25,000 jobs were available from these companies, and we had we had hundreds of businesses participate, with thousands of individuals participating, and over 25,000 jobs that people were found available. And it turned out to be just a tremendous success. I'm on the workforce development board, and I guarantee you we're going to be doing some more of those to try to make sure that we match up there. We're also making sure that some of the grants we're doing, such as through Go Virginia, working with the business community, are targeted towards the types of things that where we really need to develop more qualified people. And just this week, I was able to take or last week, I was able to get a motion passed at the Go Virginia board meeting to take a job development proposal that had been put forth by Old Dominion University down in the Norfolk area, and tie it to some things up here in Northern Virginia, to be able to have a robust program that's available through George Mason and through local economic development authorities in Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, Prince William, and Loudoun up here, as well as down in the Hampton Roads area, on cybersecurity, and particularly cybersecurity and getting people the credentials and the ability to be certified to work in the defense industry there. So there's a lot of things we can do, and I'm very optimistic about the future of Virginia. And certainly what we're getting with Amazon and the Virginia Tech involvement and others in that, and a lot of other things that are happening in our economic development picture now. We are bringing large numbers of additional jobs into Virginia. And I think there'll be tremendous spinoffs into the smaller businesses in many instances from a variety of different economic sectors that will benefit as well. And I think the future of Virginia is very, very good.
Leader Herring.
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, certainly, on paper, we look good, but the reality is, I mean, this pandemic has had an impact, and we do have the American Rescue Plan for the city of Alexandria specifically is anticipated to be about $28.6 million coming to assist the city, and just to give us some sense of what's happened, since this pandemic. As of last month, over 74,000 Virginia businesses have received $4 billion on low interest loans to help them survive the crisis. And these are loans, so the reality, this is reality, they've got to be paid back. So one of the things, Ann, you mentioned is retail, and I think with the rescue plan, I think that there is some relief, and what I like about it is that it's not either or, you can combine. So we're looking, of course, nationally, it'll be $28.6 billion coming for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund to help our small and local restaurants and craft breweries. But that money is in addition to things like the PP loans or the SBA economic injury disaster loans assistance. And so I think that what's good is that, again, it's not either or, but there will be additional assistance. Also, for those businesses that rely on transportation and transit, there's funding available in the package for our metro. For our airports, Dulles, Ronald Reagan National Airport, Dulles 84 million, Reagan National 82 million. And so all that to me is all related, because we're talking about the survival of businesses, and hopefully, as more vaccines are happening and people and look, out on the hallway, I can see traffic is picking up. People are coming out more. And so I think, but certainly we have to keep things afloat. I do feel good about the future of Virginia, but I know the reality is that, people took loans, and so they have debt in their debt column. And so the answer is trying to help retail establishments get that foot traffic in, start using transit, trying to get customers back in, and doing all that we can to keep the businesses afloat. So we're on the right track, I think, considering that we had a pandemic. So But the reality is, we know, and obviously our president knows this as well as we all know, that we businesses, independent business owners have taken a hit.
Thank you. And Delegate Levine, anything to add?
Yeah, my colleagues, Senator Barker and Delegate Herring, certainly said a lot. I will not repeat what they had to say. It's really good, informative stuff. I would just add a couple things. One is that one of the reasons that Virginia is doing better than other states in the country happens to be, and I think we all know this, because of our proximity to the federal government, because of defense spending. Virginia has natural stabilizers, right? When we have hard times, we have a regular source of business that's just native to us, that we've worked very hard on, and that we have, and that frankly helps us in comparison to other states. But I also think that we're pretty well run. When the pandemic hit, we all tightened our belts. We didn't like it, but we put a lot of funds aside to make sure that we'd have the budget. And frankly, we have very, very large reserves, which we've built up. We didn't have hardly any 7-8 years ago. And now we have a substantial amount of reserves for an emergency. And here came our emergency. And we actually still have a tremendous amount of reserves. And I'm very proud of that, because we can weather yet another emergency. Let's hope that it's a long time from now, but they will come, and we'll have those there. So I, like everyone, am really concerned about service industries, tourism, travel, and restaurants. I represent Old Town and Delray and Shirlington. I represent some real great restaurant areas in all of Northern Virginia. And restaurants are really, really hurting. And let's face it, a lot of them didn't make it. A lot of them went out of business. We try to do our best to help restaurants through things like alcohol service. You can get cocktails to go. You get a lot more to go. I love the tents out in the street in Old Town. And in fact, I've been asking the city, I think we need to keep some walking streets in Old Town, frankly. I'd love to see the whole lower part of King Street, honestly, be a walking street like they have in European cities. I just think it's really nice. But it's also about keeping our restaurants going and frankly, encouraging folks to go to restaurants when you can, carry out or outdoors. I do think they're coming back. I also think, though, when we look at what we've done, whether it's for restaurants or businesses or anything else, that we not cut off the help at a date certain. We are coming out of this, but like anything you come out of, when you come out of a disease or anything else, you come back slowly, right? First you're at 10% health, and 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. It shouldn't be all the benefits and then they're cut off. I think we need to have a gradual process to befit the fact that we're gradually getting better. And so I think that's something that the government should focus on. I also want to know a little bit about the folks who've been unemployed, because with businesses go down, a lot of people suffer. And frankly, honestly, the Virginia Employment Commission has not been as good as we want it to be. Of all the complaints I've gotten from constituents, those are the ones that hurt the most, because you give us a vaccine need or a DMV complaint, we could turn that around in a day or two, but folks have been waiting months sometimes. I should say that the Virginia Employment Commission has gotten the easy claims right out the door. If you've got a claim and it's obvious, 75, 80, 85% of the time, you get your money, everything's fine. But some of these complex claims where you've been laid off from one business, or you moved, or the business changed, we just don't have enough hearing examiners. One of the bills actually that we passed this year is to improve the VEC and to provide more services there, but that's still an issue. And I guess I would just end by saying is this: there's been real pain out there, and I don't think we can undo the real pain. A lot of Alexandrians have died. We've lost a lot of loved ones, and a lot of businesses have gone under. But I think sometimes if you look at a wildfire sweeping through an area, there's tremendous destruction, but there are new sprouts that grow up afterwards, and those actually end up being really much stronger. I think the businesses that survived this will have a tremendous renaissance afterwards. And frankly, I hate to say it, but less competition, they're going to be, people I can't wait to go back to the restaurants. They can't wait to go back to our public spaces, to go to the harbor in Old Town, to attend those great restaurants in Delray. We're tired of being cooped up. I do think that the light is at the end of the tunnel, is getting brighter and brighter. And it's going to be brighter than it was when we went in. I think business is absolutely booming for those that survived, and will be better than was even before the pandemic, with all that extra demand and a little bit less supply. I think there's a great time for business ahead, starting really this summer.
Thank you. This next question is a little bit of a long one, but it's flood mitigation has been an important issue here in the city for the last several years, especially given the frequency of those once-in-a-half-century floods that or storm events. Senator Eben, who was unable to join us this morning, patroned a bill in the Senate that authorizes grants from a local stormwater management fund to be used for flood mitigation and protection measures. Delegate Levine was the patron in the House. Delegate Levine, can you speak about the important legislation and what it means to Alexandria specifically?
Absolutely. So you're supposed to have floods according to the folks who measure those things. Once in 100 years means that on average, they occur about 1% of the time. And so you should have these massive floods once in 100 years. Well, in 2020, we had 3 so-called 100-year floods in 1 year. Well, the chance of that is 1% times 1% times 1%, or 1 in a million. So I don't think anyone believes that the 1 in a million happened. I think what we all know is there's climate change, and with climate change comes a lot of change. It's not just about global warming; it includes a lot of rain, and it's not just coastal areas. We know that Norfolk, for example, is in real danger from climate change. But in Alexandria, we had, particularly in neighborhoods like Delray and Rosemont and Arlandria, we had areas that were massive floods. People lost their basements, lost their lower floors. The water would just come pouring in. And part of the reason for that absolutely is the weather. And, climate change is a long international fight that we hope that we're all committed to, but is, not going to change, unfortunately, anytime in the near future. But some of it also has to do with the structure of our infrastructure, right? If you have a road that's tilted a certain way, or you don't have enough drainage, ditches, or the drains get clogged because the pipe capacity isn't there, boom, a whole bunch of water can come into a house. So we really need more. This is a different kind of public-private partnership, but it's between the city of Alexandria and the folks who live in these areas, and maybe installing the right kind of blockage system to push the water back into the street, maybe increasing drains, maybe even having the right kind of door or something at a house to make sure that water doesn't seep in. So this bill, which is a really good bill, which passed, is a bill to that Adam and I both had, was a bill to say that the city could use its funds at its discretion to help local homeowners or business owners take flood mitigation techniques. And that just basically short-term ways to divert the water, make your house more flood-proof, because that door or that panel that blocks a flood may cost some money, but it's a lot cheaper than a whole ruined basement. So that's something that we can do, that this bill allows. Before then, Alexandria could spend its own funds on that, but now they can. All localities can, and I think it's a really great move forward. The other bill I put forward that is a study that's going to go into a work group, but the heart of it is to study urban flooding and inland flooding, which is different from coastal flooding. It's just a different phenomenon. It has to be dealt with differently. And we've studied coastal flooding in Virginia for more than a decade now, but it's time to discuss inland and urban flooding as well.
Leader Herring or Senator Barker, would you all like to add anything to that?
I'll just say that Mark is right on. He's right on about looking at the urban flooding and inland flooding. Yeah, it's overdue. So, and great work, Mark, on that. Appreciate it.
Well, the other thing I think is important is make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do to try to mitigate some of the problems we're getting, as has been stated, are directly a result of climate change. So we did pass significant legislation in the 2020 session, sort of setting out goals and targets for a lot of things in terms of reducing our impact upon climate change. And now it's time to do the implementation. And one of the bills that I got through this year was one to dramatically increase solar capacity in Virginia and energy storage. Energy storage is where the concept where you be able to generate energy and not have it, if you don't use it pretty quickly, in many instances, it sort of just dissipates and is never used productively. So energy storage is being able to maintain that energy that can be implemented, several hours to a day or two later when there's a need for it there. And what we came up with was an opportunity for local governments and private businesses to be able to partner together to develop some of these capacities for both solar and energy storage. And we do have a very aggressive energy storage goal in the bill that we passed last year. If we are able to implement that successfully, and there's a lot of research and development going on in the energy storage area, that will dramatically help us be able to reduce greenhouse gases and the impact upon the climate.
Thank you so much. The final question for me, at least, hopefully we've got some folks ready to pepper you with more additional questions. But this session, like your special session last year, very unique in terms of, how you met, but you also were able to accomplish a great deal, in the 2021 session. Would love to hear from each of you about what you're most proud of. There's significant efforts around recognizing racism as public health crisis, criminal justice reforms. You all have made tremendous strides across a broad category of issues, and would really like to hear from you all. What were those things that you championed and what you're the most proud of? I'll start with Leader Herring.
And thanks again, great question. I'm sorry, I can't limit it to one, so I'm gonna have to do two. I'm gonna cheat. First was the bill to speed up the vaccinations. I think nothing is more important than saving Virginians' lives, and that was huge. And that again, it wasn't partisan. Another nonpartisan thing that we accomplished was actually having expungement of convictions in Commonwealth of Virginia. That was a bipartisan effort, at least in the House, and we finally got it done. We will actually have an automatic expungement component for crimes such as, drinking in public, underage drinking, things that are on people's record, but makes it difficult for them to find employment or find housing or get money to start a business. It also has a petition component, that Virginia has never had that. And we have now gone probably from dead last when it comes to giving people a second chance to leading the nation. And I'm proud of that effort. It was a lot of work. We actually had to go to mediation to get it done with the House and the Senate, but we got it done, and I'm extremely proud. It is a bill of redemption, and I'm just really proud of that, and also proud that members of the business community were supportive. And thank you all, because it just speaks volumes about people believing that individuals deserve a second chance after serving their time. So thank you.
Senator Barker.
Well, as long as Charnel's cheating, I'll cheat too. So do two things. I think, the major thing that I worked on this year was the budget and trying to do things related to economic development and maintaining our economy as strongly as we have. And we've certainly been, I think, successful there. And a lot of it is working with the business community directly to be able to have accomplished that when many other states have not been as successful there. And one of the things that I worked on this year as part of the whole budget process and the economic development issues was the issue of tax conformity. We had proposals coming out of Congress that were adopted in December, and some of which, and also things tied into the CARES Act earlier. In the budget that the governor proposed in December, it was before the full congressional action had been taken on the December 27th bill that got passed. There were a number of things that provide at the federal level benefits to individuals, and we did adopt all of those so that the individuals across the Commonwealth will be getting some, in many instances, some pretty significant benefits out of the tax conformity that we adopted there. The critical issue was what we did on businesses, which had not been in the governor's proposal fully there. The PPP loans, which are mostly converted to grants at the federal level and also at the state level, we are not counting those as income so that they're not taxes that have to be paid on that. And we did that for both those who have their businesses individually, but also through the corporate tax So we did not have a differentiation between how you structured your business operations there. The other thing that we spent a lot of time working through, and where the governors did not propose this, was on providing some opportunity for deducting business expenses associated with those PPP loans for the types of things that many businesses did, including I'm sure many of you, and particularly being able to maintain pay for the employees. That was, I think, vital to the success that we've had in Virginia this year, and it was critical there. And we did it for both the PPP loans, but also for our own state process there, which unfortunately you don't get a federal benefit from, called the Virginia Rebuild Virginia program. So that is available, and that's a program that a lot of small businesses have used last year and are continuing to use this year to be able to get through the remainder of the tax conformity, the remainder of the pandemic. What we ended up doing, and I was chair of the subcommittee in the Senate that worked this and got it done eventually, was provide opportunity for deduction of up to $100,000 in terms of the expenses associated with the PPP and the Rebuild Virginia programs. That will help a lot of businesses at a time when even the businesses that have been able to maintain themselves in many instances have been stretched pretty thin and don't necessarily have the resources. And part of what we were able to use initially, the House had a much smaller benefit. We were able to get that in the end. We were able to hold to the Senate position and get everything that we had offered to the businesses on the Senate bill adopted in the conference committee. So it was basically the entire Senate bill that got done, and then does provide the full $100,000 for deductions there. I worked a lot with chambers of commerce, with the NFIB, National Federation for Independent Businesses, with the CPAs and a whole bunch of others in being able to get this. And there were some people who initially criticized it as saying, well, it's sort of a double dipping there to not have to pay back, pay as counting the grant that you got as income, but also then being able to deduct expenses. And the selling point, I think, in the end, and getting everybody to agree on this, was saying, well, the businesses were doing what was not just good for them, but was also good for their employees, and was providing benefits and helping people and families be able to, keep afloat themselves. And, we need to make sure that we help these businesses who did the right thing for their employees and for Virginians across the board in Virginia. So I'm, extraordinarily proud to be able to do that. And then the other thing that I was proud of was actually we had bill limits. We had a limit of 12 bills in the Senate. They had a limit of 7 bills in the House. I was the only senator to get 11 of my 12 bills passed. Unfortunately, the one that I'm going to talk about now was the one that I did not get passed. And I see Josh smiling right now, because the one I did not get passed was a bill I had in for the second straight year to be able to help realtors be able to get health insurance coverage. Realtors, by and large, are 1099 employees, so they're not covered under a plan that their real estate company might have. And what we have is a situation, realtors by and large are, certainly middle class, upper middle class individuals in most instances, but 20% of realtors in Virginia do not have health insurance coverage because they don't have the same opportunity to be able to get it through their employment as other people do. We had set up a bill that provided health insurance coverage for them that met all the requirements of the Affordable Care Act. Everything from pre-existing conditions being covered, no ability to be able to deny anyone who is a realtor coverage under this program, the coverage for the children of realtors up to age 20 till their 26th birthday. We did every single thing in there, and still were unable to get the bill passed. We got it passed 38-1 in the Senate, but in the House, which had voted for it 95-3 last year, this year it was killed. So it was very, very frustrating to put a ton of work in. And my view is that we need to make sure that where individuals are willing to use all their own money, and there's no public support for this type of thing, to be able to get this health insurance coverage. And one way or another, I was proud to have worked on it with the realtors and others. And I'm going to renew that effort next year and make sure we finally do get this passed.
And Delegate Levine. Have you
Well,
closed out?
just because I think it has to be mentioned, because we haven't mentioned it, there's just two extraordinary things that I think history will take away from this session. And one is that Virginia ended the death penalty. And, you know, Virginia has actually executed more people than any other state in the United States. Most people think it's Texas because Texas has done more so recently. We have a 400-year history. That just is the first Southern state. It's a big deal, and I just think it should be mentioned. The other thing that's a really big deal is that we are on the path to legalizing marijuana in Virginia. George Barker mentioned that he was disappointed by some of the things the House did. Those of us in the House were disappointed. The Senate watered that down somewhat. I still hope that it'll happen sooner rather than in 2024. But it's a really big deal. I got to give credit to Leader Herring for all the work she did on that bill. But it's like a 500-page bill. Let me tell you, she did a lot of work on it. But it's complex in terms of the regulation and the business end of it, and expungement of past and making sure that communities that were excluded are all in it. It was a very, very complex bill. And I'm just, because my colleagues didn't mention, I just want to mention those two. I think those are the two bills that this session will most be remembered for, frankly. The bills I'm most proud of, the bills I passed, were gun bills, frankly. And, you know, we've now seen, unfortunately, with the pandemic receding, Atlanta and Boulder, 2 mass shootings just in a week. And it tells us that we need, throughout the United States and still in Virginia, better gun regulations. The weapon used in Boulder, an AR-15, is the kind of thing I took a lot of heat for last year for trying to say you shouldn't have extended magazines. You shouldn't be able to take these military-style weapons that come from weapons of war that are designed to kill as many people as fast as possible. And they shouldn't be readily accessible to anybody who wants to buy them. And I'm still going to keep that fight. I think that's a fight for a future year. But the bills I got passed this year were bills to protect our safety in public spaces. And frankly, a lot of it came out of what happened on January 6th, when we had a bunch of people, as we all know, try to overthrow the government. And I thank God that DC had such strict gun laws, because look at the damage they did with flagpoles and bear spray. Imagine if all those protesters or riot insurrectionists, whatever you want to call them, had been armed to the teeth, and they could have been in a place like Virginia. And then I don't even want to think about what could have happened to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Vice President. I mean, really, as awful as January 6th was, it could have been so much worse. So the bills that I passed, one I affectionately call the Safe Capital Bill. It makes it illegal to bring a firearm or explosive into the Capitol or into anywhere on Capitol Square. And that's really important because people use Capitol Square to practice their First Amendment rights, to protest. And what happened is the people who want us to relax gun regulations like to come around and tote with their weapons. And then people who are often victims of gun violence, survivors of gun violence, have lots of family members, care about gun violence protection, they couldn't protest because they were being threatened by the people with the guns. This allows everyone to come out and practice their First Amendment rights, and they can yell, they can scream, they can have signs, they can visit our offices, they can email us, but they can't threaten us with weapons. And it's broader than that. A lot of people haven't taken notice. It's every single state-owned building. So it could be your local DMV, it could be your unemployment office, whatever is a state-owned building throughout the Commonwealth. No guns either. Because these are public spaces. They're well secured. These are secure places. We have police who, of course, are allowed to carry guns in these places. Security is allowed to, but not just the public to come in to threaten us. And it's a really big bill, and one that took a lot of work to get through, and I'm very proud of. And the other bill that's related is the safe polling bill. When you go to vote, you can't have firearms, just like you can't have literature promoting your candidate within 40 feet. You also can't have firearms within 40 feet of a polling place. People get awful upset on election day, and there's some sharp disagreement among voters. We don't need voters packing weapons when they have that disagreement. So when you go to the polls, it's safe. Counting centers, recount centers, so we don't have what happened in Pennsylvania, where a couple of Virginians came to a recount center to intimidate recount officials. And so when it comes to firearms, I'm always pushing to make Virginia safer. And I think we took tremendous step forwards this year.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Libby. I know that there's been a few questions popping up in the chat. I'm going to turn everything over to Maria for a few minutes so that we can make sure we can get to folks' questions, and then we'll close out our morning. Go ahead, Maria. Thank you.
Absolutely. So we do have a couple questions. I'll just read them straight from the chat, and we'll let our electeds please jump in as you see fit to answer. So our first one's from Stacy, and it says, what types of programs and services are being created for the creative community, which was hit particularly hard by the pandemic, but they maybe didn't qualify for most of the assistance?
Well, I think one area that there is opportunity is that some of the creative community and others did not meet all the requirements necessarily for the PPP loans and grants there. That was one of the reasons that we established Rebuild Virginia, to be able to provide a lot of different types of businesses, including small businesses and some of the creative and other types of things, to be able to get loans that are comparable there. In Virginia that end up, being grants that there as well. That's where, what we have done at the state level, which I think is making a big difference, and part of the reason that we have been able to help a lot of businesses stay in business and not go under during this pandemic.
I would just note that the questioner is absolutely right. Tourism, hotels, restaurants, I mentioned, but absolutely the arts have really suffered. The theater, it's really hard to go to the theater, and absolutely should be something that both local leaders and the state need to keep their focus on.
I have nothing else to add. They said it all, but yeah, and I think the program that George mentioned, and we need to just keep our eye on things through that program. So again,
since most of these people are 1099 employees, and they don't really have a consistent form of income, while a loan will help temporarily, a loan is not going to help in the long run if they have no means to pay it back.
It's a fair point. I do think the arts, the creative community it's like what I said before, will come back really strongly. It probably starting in the summer and in the months ahead, but there's no question it's been devastating. And you make a good point, Stacey Williams.
Who could I work with from any of your offices to make sure that, one, we are heard, and two, we have a voice in the planning that goes into helping us?
Should we put it in the chat? You can call Zach Rickard at my office, and also send me an email. I'll put it in the chat, my information.
Thank you.
I'll do the same.
I'll do the same.
All right, moving on.
And please don't forget to reach out to city officials, Stacey. A lot of this your local officials can help you as well. So
I've been working with local officials as well as with the Virginia Commission on the Arts, because they don't have individual funding they don't have funding for individual artists. So I'm working with them to try to change that as well. But I would also like to work with your offices on this in addition.
And Anne, if I may. Hey, Anne, This is John Chapman. Stacey, you can definitely connect with me, and we can talk about that as well. I do own a tour company, so I certainly understand the challenge of supporting our 1099 folks, because I have a couple as well. So I'd love to work with you on how we get some frankly grants, not loans, that can help folks get back on their feet.
Thank you.
And Stacey, if you want to connect with Maria and myself in the future, we trying to collect feedback from all of our members on how best to support members who we might have missed in terms of engagement. Certainly want to be sure that the chamber is serving as a resource to include your experiences as we have engagement with our elected leaders at all levels of government.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to another question, which is again along the lines of the pandemic, and it's from Chris. And he would like to know if our elected leaders on the phone agree with what is being, promoted by the health department and the mayor for people to continue staying home at the moment. And I know we saw earlier this week that the governor is loosening some restrictions in a limited capacity starting next week, but do you have anything to add to that piece from a small business owner?
I think people need to be prudent. I think people need to recognize their own individual situations. If you've been double vaccinated, you're one of the lucky ones. I mean, this is, I think I was, Stephen Colbert had this joke where they showed all people in their 70s and 80s out at spring break and out on the beaches. But my thought was, you know what? Y'all have an advantage, at least a temporary advantage for a few months. Would love to see older people who have been vaccinated or essential workers who've been vaccinated. People who've been vaccinated should absolutely go back to businesses. And I think that message should be clear. Those of us who've not been, and I haven't been yet, I've been waiting my turn. We have to be more careful. There's still vaccine around. It's still being spread. There's some variants going around. So I think all of us should still wear a mask, should still socially distant. And, I do try to patronize our restaurants, but I do it to go. I don't go inside. The lucky vaccinated can go inside. I still patron them by getting food to go. I think for a few months, and again, the population vaccinating is increasing at a geometric rate. So I really feel like, May and June and, things are, but in the meantime, use common sense. If you've been vaccinated, you got a lot more privilege than those of us who haven't been.
I would just say that I know that what restrictions we put in the state is evidence-based. I think we're going to all, like Mark said, continue to wear a mask, socially distance. There are variants out there. And what Dr. Fauci said was so true recently, where we still need to wear a mask, and I don't disagree with being cautious, because remember pre-vaccination, before we were starting to put needles in arms, we lifted restrictions and our numbers went up, which then causes business have to close down again. I really believe that if we really follow the guidelines, that we will be out of this sooner rather than loosening up too fast, and then we're going to have to hunker down again. And that's not what we want. We want this to end. And I think that the best thing is to follow the safety precautions that have been put out there, and your own protocol. I live with an aging mother. I have my own protocol when I come into the house. I go nowhere near her. I come straight upstairs. I mean, there's a protocol I follow to make sure that she's safe. And I think that we all have to make sure that we're keeping everyone as safe as possible so we can eventually come out of this pandemic quicker instead of backtracking. And that's my concern.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the things is that I'm glad to have finally found something where I have an advantage over my younger House colleagues, because I've hit 60, so therefore I've already gotten vaccinated. But when I go out, I'm always wearing a mask in public and doing those types of things to make sure that even though I may not be as susceptible to getting the virus, I don't want to be spreading it to other people as well. And I think we just need to use those common sense types of approaches to things to make sure that we're doing what we can to contribute to reducing the number of deaths that we've had. It's been, a heavy toll in Virginia and elsewhere across the country, in terms of the number of deaths that have been experienced, and certainly something that we need to keep paying attention to is to make sure that we don't, we do what we can to protect not only ourselves, but others.
Great, thank you. Okay, this next question is a little bit of a long one, but it's from Stephanie Landrum, who I'm sure all of you are familiar with, who's the president of our Alexandria Economic Development Partnership, so it's a good one. So bear with me as I read this. Thank you all for your support and commitment to economic development in the Commonwealth. Many of the statewide programs are critical to our local efforts in Alexandria. We look forward to attracting new businesses to the city and utilizing both, sorry, I lost my place. Utilizing both the VJIP and Talent Accelerator programs that you funded through the VEDP, but may be more visible as we move into recovery. The city and the business community is excited to explore our new ability to establish outdoor refreshment areas in the city, now allowed with the support of the General Assembly, something with which the Chamber was also very supportive of. Thoughts on which part of the city of Alexandria you would like us to focus on with this new tool?
West End.
Old Town, Delray.
West End.
West End. That's where
I love those.
and I represent.
You know, as someone who represents Old Town, no, look, I mean, it is like a colonial city, right? I mean, we are the oldest part. Sorry, folks, and we have all this history, and we have cobblestone streets, and I think of European cities where they have walking streets, and I love it. I'd love to bring King Street, parts of it, at the lower foot of it, down to the cobblestones again, because I think we have a lot of tourism, and I'd like to make those permanently walking streets, frankly. But there are also areas in Delray that have really good outdoor. Let's bring back some walking streets. I love that idea, and I think it can last past COVID.
So we were annexed in the 50s, but we have history too.
All right.
We have a lot of Civil War history. We have a lot here, and there's great opportunities. We have a lot of families in the West End, and wow, what an opportunity to have, both, mixed drain, but have, surely temple stations and good things like that. And yes, we like walkable. We like to walk in the West End too. So this is an opportunity to, like a lot of people say, let's be bold, let's think new. West End.
Great. I love that this has now become sort of a competition between the neighborhoods. Thanks, Jesse, for starting that battle. So in terms
Maria, I was just going to invite Delegate Levine for a walking tour of the West End of Alexandria.
I love out the West End, Fort Ward. There's a lot of history out there. I don't deny that. I love the West End too.
Come on to Cameron Station. We'll take you around.
I've been many times to Cameron Station.
Excellent. Switching gears a little bit back to talking about the pandemic and the procedures and such, we have a comment really from Cindy, who is in the meeting and trade association planning. As you know, meeting planners are trying to figure out when and how many and all of those pieces as we sort of move into what is hopefully going to be a good summer and a good fall. And I think what she's trying to point out is that the sooner that they can, meeting planners and those in the hospitality industry can know what procedures and restrictions and capacity counts they're going to need to know for the fall, the better. So if anyone has anything to add there, I know that you've indicated we're trying to follow the science and be as careful as possible, but also keeping in mind that, there are real world implications for businesses who are trying to be proactive and trying to follow all the rules, but also to plan and make sure that they're ready and able to get back to the capacities, even as incrementally as it may be.
And this is where I say that I always like to say we are all connected, and this is a good example. And it's true, businesses need to plan, they need to know dates. We all individually have to do our part, that if we're looking at a date, to make sure that we're wearing our masks and make sure that we're not causing a spike in numbers where it causes it to change. So I think for the past months, I think we've been good at that. And I just don't, my fear is that we lit up, and that's some of my biggest concern. And I know that the anxiety out there, and I saw it sort of like, yes, having people stay home, yes, businesses lose out, but without a stability and an opportunity for us to bring those numbers down low enough where we can meet that date for businesses to open their doors, we're going to lose a lot more, and this is going to last a lot longer. So, but definitely, you know, I agree, and definitely keeping in mind that we need to have specific dates, and keeping to it and making sure that we're working together to meet that goal.
Thing I think provides an opportunity is the fact that the state of emergency, which was issued a year ago, that will expire June 30th at the end of this fiscal year. That's part of the state law on that. So I think what needs to be done is for us and the business community to work with the governor's office and others on what happens at that point. Is the governor going to do another state of emergency starting July 1 the next day to do that? Or are we going to try to say that by that point we expect to be in a good enough position to be able to not have that state of emergency and to have the restrictions that have been in place terminated at that point to provide opportunities for things to go back towards a normal situation. It will be the new normal, not the old normal probably, but and there will be a lot of recommendations in terms of how to operate. But I think it is important, and particularly like for the conventions and other types of things that are held. And there have been actually some state legislative meetings that used to be held in Alexandria that now are being done. And this is national. From states all across the country. Have come in and had meetings in Alexandria, and now a lot of those have been on online type of thing. But if we can get back to the point where we are having those meetings in person, just to make sure that it's being done safely, and that we can get it accomplished there. And I think that being able to plan in advance for what we're going to do after June 30th is what's important there. So contributions will to that process will be greatly appreciated.
Senator Barker's right that June 30th is when the executive order ends, and that's mere happenstance because of our legislative year. But I also think it's a really good date if you just look at the progress of the pandemic. President Biden has assured us that anyone will be able to get a vaccine in the country by May 1st. That's an extraordinary promise, frankly, that I think any of us would have been shocked to have heard 2 months ago. But I trust this president. I have as much faith in this president as I didn't have in the last one. And I believe that he mentioned July 4th, Independence Day. Go Joe Biden. I think by July 4th, I'm hoping to have the event that I've had at my house every year where we go and watch the Alexandria fireworks together. I am just really hopeful that we are back to normal by then. I don't know what's going to happen July 1st. I do think we probably need to continue some, but I really don't think it's going to be anywhere near the state of emergency. I am optimistic. There's always possibility of new variants. I don't mean to be Pollyannish. Things can happen. But for the moment, I think the future is bright. I think June 30th is a great date if you want to pick one for the before and after period.
Great. Thank you all. We're just about at time, and we always like to keep our meetings to the time that we published. But thank you all for putting your contact information in the chat. So if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to our wonderful electeds on the call today, or to either Ann or I at the chamber. We're always happy to help and funnel information as best we could. So I will turn it back over to Ann to close us out.
Yeah, well, just a big thank you to all of you for coming and joining us today. Thank you for the good-natured ribbing, West End versus Delray. Always love to have a good laugh about the passion that we all have for our city and all areas of our city. And as always, appreciate the time that you give us and your thoughtful responses. So I know reconvene session is coming up in a couple of weeks on April 7th. So you guys will certainly have quite a bit to do in a couple of weeks, but thank you for your commitment to the city and your time this morning. And with that, we'll close out our morning. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.